think that they can beat me. They think that they can take Fairy Foxglove. No Werecat can take me. Bring it on!
Howdy doody, this is the podcast that is the Oddcast. Yes, this week we're celebrating because Gregory Alexander Sharp's book, Il Lupo, his first book, is free from the 13th of May until Saturday. Because I can't count that far. But it's free. Complete freedom.
That they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
Tearing me eye. And we're going to have a post-roll from Sinister Soup, which is Grendel Press's podcast themselves. So if you wait right until the end, then you'll be able to listen to a little bit of Sinister Soup. And I would go and recommend going doing that one as well and doing it and going finding it and things. Okay, so I'm sorry that was a long introduction, but everything's in the descriptor and we love you very much. Enjoy. Vaunt, read by the narrator. I vaulted, vaunt-like, through the front door headfirst. The door slammed open to announce my return. I'd arrived home. I surveyed the room as I twisted through the room and landed on my feet into the hallway. I would land on my feet. Obviously, I am a cat. Flittering things surrounded me in the air. There were lots of them. They were fairies, lots of flittering fairies. This was a kind of heaven for me. Can you imagine this scene for one such as me? After all, I am a cat. I instantly smashed two of the little flying green women out of the air with now what were actually paws, not hands. I landed on them as they fell, crushing them into the marble with wet, crunchy noises. Oh, this was great! As my hero, Tony the Tiger, used to say. Whatever happened to Tony the Tiger? You know, I don't see Frosties anymore. I've not had Frosties for a while. No, stay on focus, Vaughn. You have some fairies to batter. I checked the fairies beneath my feet for signs of life. One was a puddle and a bit yucky. The other one was stuck to the floor, scrambling about. Her ribcage was crushed and the sticky bits rolling her down with her own, I'll say it again, sticky internal bits. She was trying to drag herself away from me, but what she did really was slowly pull herself apart in a spurt of a sort of bloody liquid. And then she died. It's a boring dead thing now. But the others still fluttered and struggled to get away from me. Not boring. This was a little creature Armageddon about to take place with me as the playful but vindictive god of doing it. So I launched myself into is it a flock? A flock of fairies? Wait a minute, I could just Google that. Nope. The professor said I need to maintain the task. I launched my way into the flock. I batted at several of the flying little women as I passed through. Perhaps shoal would be more appropriate for fairies. I don't know. Flock of fairies, shoal of fairies. 3 of the batted things went flying out of the floating crowd like pretty fast flying green shuttlecocks. They impacted at the end of their comet-like trails in a variety of ways and to a variety of outcomes for the fairy. One was fired into the red velvet chaise longue in the corner of the hall, from which she bounced like a green squash ball, recovering the control of her flight and returning to the throng. Yeah, throng. That sounds much better than a flock or a shoal of fairies. A throng of fairies. I wonder what the professor thinks you'd call them. He's an expert in this. In this area. He should know what a group of fairies. Come on! I need to get. The other 2 fairies came to good grief as they impacted like meteors. The first became somewhat of a permanent smear on the door to the study. It took me some cleaning to get it off. I tell you, Silly Bang does not remove all stains. It doesn't remove fairy smears. The other little lady, Auntie, miraculously ended up in the professor's umbrella stand. For every miracle, I'm afraid there has to be an anti-miracle, and this was one of those for that fairy. You would think an umbrella stand would be an okay place for a small thing to land. You would think that it would be unlikely to get damaged by umbrellas. Well, in that case, you would have been right. Sadly, this was no normal umbrella stand. This was one owned by my slightly psychotic Simon. It held a range of Northern African tribal spears, all of which had very sharp and very pointy bits. I'd been taken through the range of spears at least once or twice, so it felt like a million times by the prof, and I'd pretended to be interested. It made him happy. The fairy had decided to skewer herself on a Maasai assegai, which was actually my favourite sharp, pointy bit of the set. In fact, she was so well skewered that I don't think I could have done such a good job if I'd had time and had tried to do it on purpose. I went to her as she wiggled and wriggled on the spear. She was trying to fly from it with damaged wings as she struggled. Things just got bloodier and worse for her. It was a miracle that she was still alive, or maybe not. But do you know what? She wasn't happy. She'd been kebabbed through the lower spine from back to front. That looked so painful, and she was racked with agony. I smiled at her and she momentarily relaxed, looking at me with desperation and hope. Was I going to help her? Well, it seemed that way. I nodded to her in a comforting manner and reached towards the pinned creature, and I just gently flicked her feet. She screamed again in thrilling pain and started to spin around the protruding spike in an anti-clockwise direction. I got 3 good rotations before she went all limp and spoiled it. Once floppy, she stopped and the pretty spin ended, and she was boring. But that was okay. There were so many more flying small things to play with. I batted another fairy out of the air into the ground. She recovered quickly, picking herself up and preparing to take off again. I caught her in my grip and lifted her to my face to look at her properly. They were very pretty. They were very pretty. I smiled at it as it struggled, my paw gripping it solid so its arms were pinned to its sides. It could only struggle, and I held it tight until it relaxed. It had gone floppy in my grasp, its eyes closed and ready for me to... Well, I don't know what it was ready for me to do, but it had just sort of given up on all hope. Once it accepted its fate, I kind of paused until it was an uncomfortable pause, and then I blew on it gently. It moved and slowly opened its eyes to look at me. The worst hadn't happened. I opened my hand to have it lie across my open palm, and it looked at me confused and slowly got to its feet, constantly looking at me. She must have thought that I was going to grab her at any moment, but I didn't. The funny little thing seemed to relax, and then she curtsied and gave her thanks to me as she took off from my hand. This was fun. I let her get a foot or two into the air and then recaptured her in my talon claw and bit her in two. Oh, it was delicious. The crunch, frosties. My teeth sliced through her body like material shears. I had split her vertically in half, or as close as I could to 2 hours. I felt her rip as I tugged her away from my mouth with a forceful pull. I heard the shrill scream of a death. What fun. What? Don't be disgusted, that's what we do. I know you'll be getting bored of this line, but I'm a cat. It's what we do. This was a cat's job, and a cat was going to do it. I paused to enjoy my crunchy meal as I now considered the dead catch in my hand. I shook it a little to see if it still had any life. Sadly, it didn't. But I have to tell you, it tasted bloody good. What? It tasted like chicken. I know, that old descriptor. I know that you taste some kind of new meat and you tend to say it tastes like chicken, but this fairy flesh did. I don't know what I expected it to taste like, but chicken wasn't it. I think this would have actually been a taste sensation, lightly grilled with a bit of lemon, maybe a touch of garlic. Bringing the rest of the dead fairy up to my face for another bite, I turned, and there she fucking was.
Foxglove. What the fuck now? I yelled as squealing flying fairies shot behind me and cowered. Something else had come through the door behind the freaking flock of fairies. The thing was so fast, it was actually pretty hard to see, but there was no fooling moi. I had my big girl pants on and was the equal to anything that could come at me. So come at me, bro. It stopped, or should I say paused, and I finally got a chance to tell what the flashing shadow actually was. Yes, in this case, it paused Get it? Well, you should. Paused, huh? Paused because it was a human cat, like a werecat. Keep up, guys. Its mouth was bloody, and Fairy Daisy was in its left paw. Well, half of Fairy Daisy was in its claw, thingy-me-jig. Some of Daisy hung from its smiling, munching maw. I could hear the crunching of the meal it was so evidently enjoying. The werecat stood, unafraid, watching me with those strange golden eyes while she masticated away on Daisy. Masticated, you filthy bastards. Masticated means chewed. Chewed. It was uncomfortable to watch, actually, the chewing. It was even more uncomfortable to listen to its now silent room. Silent apart from the munching and the cracking of the horrific snack and the silent loudness of the creature's smile. It paused again, looked deep into my eyes as though it could look into my soul through them, and swallowed its mouthful. I shook my head and broke the head-on, staring match. When I refocused on it took the other paw that had Fairy Fuchsia squirming and screaming in it. And, it just lifted her to its tooth-beckoned mouth and paused with its paw again near its open jaws, while holding again my eye. Why was it not biting? Shouldn't there have been more chewing and, getting into its dinner? Oh, wait, I see. I'm meant to be upset. Oh, funny little creature. He doesn't understand me at all. She, I'm gonna call it a she, the creature, was definitely, she's definitely a she, was locking eyes with me to make sure that I could see her commit the murder that she would be undertaking. She obviously wanted it to be a very obvious thing, a gross act of violence committed against Fuchsia. Wow. The poor animal must have thought this would affect me in some negative way, that I would get angry or upset, that I would do something, that I might actually give a fuck about Fuchsia. Maybe the werecat thought I would help the fairy. Why would I do that, though? Fuchsia had been stupid enough to get caught. It was not my problem, was it? And violence, unfounded violence? Well, it turns me on, to be honest. Plenty more of them, sister, I told the smiling cat thing as she threatened to bite the fairy in her claw. Fuck you, Fuchsia, I shouted at the crying flower fairy. I saw a moment of disquiet in those almond feline eyes. She was confused by my statement.
Vaughn, the smile was terrifying. Foxglove was very fucked up in the head. She was a wrong 'un, as Simon would say. I held the fairy daintily at my mouth as it struggled and pleaded for its life. Strangely, the fairy was not asking me for mercy. That weirded me out. The fairy was not begging me, it was begging the purple-haired fairy.
Help me, Foxglove. Help me. Please don't let it eat me, Foxglove. Help me, please.
Ah, this may mean that I'm in deep shit. The fairy, even after seeing me disembowel and kill and half-eat other members of the fairy school... No, school can't be right for a group of fairies. They don't look like... Is it whales that are schools? I don't know. Cloud fairies, maybe? Anyway, well, after me doing some rather nasty stuff to her sisters, that the captured fairy was still more terrified of Foxglove than me. Maybe I was in deep doo-doo.
Go on, kitty! Eat the little bitty shitty-witty-witty fairy-ooey booey! I hope she gives you a bag tummy tum-tum and the shits.
Foxglove said laughingly. Psycho. The cats admire that, though. The boss fairy turned and stared at the other fairies who joined in with the laughter, the forced laughter that they gave her. Maybe they were terrified of her too. They were more terrified of her than me. I I watched him for a moment. This was surprising, and maybe I should get out of here. It really was disquieting. The fairy I held now turned towards me and prayed. I didn't expect a praying fairy, and to be honest, if it wasn't going to upset that Foxglove fucker, then killing it would be pointless. Fuck it. I let go of the complaining fairy who fluttered out of the room.
Thank you, thank you, thank you,
it repeated as it flew away.
Boring!
Shouted Foxglove.
You're so fucking boring! Now fuck off to your litter tray, kitty! I'm busy!
Then she turned her back on me. I'd been dismissed. I was stunned.
Get looking for it! I will sort out pussykins!
Fairies all flew off in different directions. I must admit, I stood there a little nonplussed. What was happening? Should she rightly not be terrified of me right now? This little monster was completely unhinged. She was a fluttery little thing. Was I not a fluttery little thing's worst nightmare?
Foxglove! I smiled at the Werecat. It was confused and thus off balance. I could tell. But I must admit, I was bluffing at this point. I had no power here. Well, I guess that's a lie, actually. I had the power to confuse, lie, be deceptive to the cat. This seemed to be enough for now. The Werecat became... well, she changed in front of me into a delightful-looking rock chick. God damn it! In another world circumstance, me and her would go out for cocktails and be partying, but in this case, I'm gonna have to fucking kill her. Well. What's your name? I asked her. I had to keep her distracted while the house was searched. The girl just stared at me and moved slowly with all the grace of a professional dancer. Wait, no, a professional killer? No. She was like a deadly assassin. Ugh. Why was she not answering, though? This was so fucking rude. Stupid, annoying bitch. You're being ill-mannered to a guest, I told her. The prof would not like a guest at his house to be treated like this, would he? She just continued to smile and stare. That stare was actually pretty hypnotic, but I maintained my levels of anger, which were ready and brimming. I would not get distracted from my job today. I would do the distracting. You not able to talk or something, dummy? I asked her. She nodded, smiled, and then pointed to me in response to this question that I was trying to use as an insult. Oh, I said, a little disarmed by this, truthfully. I'm sorry to hear that. Or not hear that, I suppose. I don't know why I apologized to her, but I did. Weird, huh? A door opened behind me, and in walked Dave, the house pet horror thing, and 5 of the flying fairies. Fairy Holly held a small wooden cup. Had they found it? That could not be it. They are so fucking stupid. Dave sort of barked and went running over to greet the strange visitor. She must be a regular guest or a member of the household. The professor has taste. She was pretty scrummy, actually. The Werecat crouched and enveloped the horrid creature in her arms as he jumped up and danced around her. He was so excited to see her, and she him. Great, the cat was distracted. I'm going to take my opportunity to fly over to the cupbearers and see what they're so happy with themselves about. It looked sort of shitty to be the Grail, but then I remembered Raiders of the Lost Ark and the idea that Christ had been a simple carpenter. I guess that if that's true, this could be the Grail, I suppose. But that'd be too easy to find if it were, right? How do you know it's the Grail? I asked Holly. The fairy looked at me nervously and then looked back at the others in, that way that she wanted reassurance. But in response was just a lot of shrugging and really careful smiles. It had a simple card leaning on the display case saying Holy Grail, she said. Give it here, I demanded, and the thing was flown over to me and I grasped it. It felt right. Behind me, the kerfuffle had stopped. The reintroductions between Dave and the cat were done. As I turned, she stood up, stroking the thing behind its ears, and her angry eyes fell on me. The distraction was over. What to do now? I hefted the cup. It was really not too heavy. I started to laugh. The woman cocked her head in a way that a listening cat does. You know, that thing where they flop an ear over and perk their head? Almost like a dog, but elegant. A look of bafflement spread across that oh-so-pretty face. This was gonna be fun. Catch me if you can, bitch! I yelled and shot past her and threw the cat flap at the bottom of the ancient fucking door. If I could just get to the estate boundary before her, then I could magic the fuck out of her. She just better not catch me on my way there, I suppose.
The Professor. Having arrived at the house, I needed to know what had gone on. Faunt, there seemed to be bits of fairy hither and thither strewn about the place. But what happened to the others? She looked at me closely as though I was asking her a difficult question. I waited patiently for an answer, and then she just shrugged and made to leave the room. Bugger. I touched her gently on her retreating shoulder in order to gain her attention once more. Faunt, was Fairy Foxglove here? I asked. The Werecat looked at me as though I was stupid, then nodded, and turned to leave again. Faunt! I yelled. Bloody Werecats. So difficult to keep them focused. She turned and rolled her eyes. This was not sign language for, what do you mean now? But vaunt language for, well, the same question. I paused, trying to think of how to phrase the question I needed to be answered. I'd have to go and check, she signed. This confused me somewhat. Check what, Vaunt? I asked. The fridge, she signed back before trying to turn again. Vaunt! She disappeared halfway through the word. The door to the pantry opened and closed, and within a second, she was back in front of me as though nothing had happened. Have you just bloody gone and bloody checked the fridge? I asked her. She nodded, lifted a thumb, and gave me that big smile that rarely occurred. The fridge was obviously in a satisfactory condition. Jesus bloody Christ on a bike! I had to calm myself a little in order to be able to continue this conversation. So infuriating. Where did Foxglove go? She flew through the flap and disappeared, she signed. Right, okay. Well, that's good then. That's very good. We must have scared her off and stopped her from completing whatever her plan was here. Good. Right, I need to get in contact. The dark-haired girl lifted her hands to interrupt me and laughed. I mean, silently, obviously. She must be very stupid, she signed, still rocking a little with mirth. This was a strange thing to say. I mean, sign. Okay. And why do you say that, Vaunt? I asked. My stomach had flipped a little. I knew this was going to be, bad. I just bloody knew it. The cat was silently laughing still. She had to pause and wipe her eyes before she could continue. After finally gathering herself, she looked at me and signed. She only stole that old wooden egg cup from the case in your study. She couldn't continue signing after that as she found the whole thing so amusing. The wait for her to resume her signing was killing me. Frustration abounded. The one next to the gold jewel-covered cross. So stupid, she signed, laughing again. The what? I said out loud, rather rhetorically, really. I had to let this sink in. she'd stolen it. Oh, fuck no. No, I said out loud. The cat looked at me confused. She started to sign, but I couldn't keep an eye on her. Shit! That was the bloody Grail, I said out loud again. After a moment of sphincter twitching apprehension, I looked at the girl. I must have seemed incredibly serious because she backed away a little and signed. I bet that's a bad thing she's got it then, right? A bad thing. I almost bloody fainted.
Lucy. The small fairy arrived. I know. How did I know where she was going to arrive at? I don't know, to be honest. I don't think I know these things at all. It just felt like the right place for me to be at this time. At the boundary to Simon's estate was a small brook. As the fairy alighted on a pebble burn in the centre of the thin stream, the scene became quiet. It was as if the world was waiting for something important to happen. This was important. Foxglove was slightly hysterical as she talked to herself and laughed about her great success.
Foxglove, I'd made it. I'd flown like the devil was on my tail, trying to get to me, but I got to the boundary first. Here, I could do my magic I needed to become a god. The great news was there was no huge rite or sacrifice of 1,000 virgins, any of that crap. All I believed in Fae needed to become a god was to drink from another god's vessel. This was a god's vessel. I could drink water from it, and I would become a god. I placed the cup on the ground for a moment and did a little dance. I could not help myself, I know. I might have a werecat chasing me, but a girl has to celebrate her wins and sins in a way that she wants. Okay. Calm, breathe. Ooh, I had to calm myself down and do the do I needed to do. I reached for the cup. My hands were shaking. I was nervous to touch it. I thought it might go bang. This seemed too easy.
Don't be a foolish fairy,
Said a deep voice behind me. I froze. I did not recognize this voice. I span as quick as I could, finger raised, ready to kill. Oh. Well, the werewolf stood in front of me looking all handsome and devilish.
Oh, well, that's a different look than I thought I was going to have.
Said the beautiful man as he checked himself over before carrying on with his train of thought.
You might not recognise me.
He said.
Well, actually, I suppose that's not true, sort of factually, but you do recognise me, but this is not the real me.
My initial shock and joy had settled now as Will babbled this nonsense. Okay, let's see where he's going with this. You're not you, I asked him.
See, that's difficult again. In truth, I am me, but I'm not Will.
Will said.
Is that okay?
Okay, I answered. That makes fuck all sense, I told him, shaking my head and turning slowly to the cup. I mean, he's very nice to look at, but he's such a complete dumbass. I'm just gonna have a little drinky-winky from the cuppy-wuppy, and then we can continue this conversation. But don't mind me, I'm not here to spoil your mental collapse. I continued as I dipped the cup in the stream. This was actually somewhat of a challenge, I have to admit. The cup was nearly as big as me. I struggled to get the water in it and not get my pretty shoes wet, but I managed and stooped, and went to take a drink.
I am Lucifer Morningstar. I am the devil. I am Beelzebub.
Will told me. This made me stop taking my sip from the Grail and pull that face you do when you have to deal with the terminally stupid. What was he fucking thinking?
Lucy. The fairy went to take a drink.
I am Lucifer Morningstar. I am the devil. I am Beelzebub.
The fairy paused at this statement and smiled, turning towards me.
Right. Okay, then. Of course you are.
She said.
You need help, Will. You really do.
Oh, for badness sake.
I said out loud and flashed into my true form before her. The fairy froze.
There, you see?
I told her before turning back to my will shape. The fairy was still frozen, but gave a slight nod of her head.
Don't drink from the cup,
I told her. The frozen fairy went from slowly nodding to slowly shaking her head, which I assumed meant that she had the idea that drinking from the cup would be bad. Suddenly, the little green face smiled. It was a bestial little smile. Then she dunked her entire head in the cup and started to gulp down its contents.
No, don't drink it,
I half-heartedly said. The fairy came up for air and laughed hysterically, until she realised after a little while that nothing had happened.
No, whatever you do, don't drink it.
I repeated. Foxglove was now flying up in the air, her wings vibrating the air and the rage in her building. Then kaboom! A lightning strike hit her, and she was blown out of the sky. She landed limply on a pebbly little beach next to the brook. Why does no one ever listen to me? I asked no one in particular. It was me again. The me I see, that is. She must be dead. I went over to the fallen fairy. Then another lightning strike tore into her, and she awoke and began to absorb the energy from the strike. She became a fairy-shaped lightning being as she took in more and more energy.
Yes! Yes! I can feel it! I'm becoming a god!
She yelled madly.
Oh, hooray, you're becoming a god.
I said somewhat sarcastically as I found myself in will form again.
Problem is, you didn't read the fine print, did you?
Lightning now burst from the fairy's form and earthed itself beneath her. The brook started to steam.
I am a god!
She announced.
Well, you are right now.
I told the newborn godhead. She pointed a finger at me and shot a blast of electricity from its tip. She yelled as it hit me and fizzled out. I shook my head at her.
Remember, not mortal.
As expected, the new god raged. The lightning stopped, just fizzling out like a damp firework fuse. The fairy's new electrical god energy drained out into the ground. She became aware that she was failing. The power was leaving her. "Oh no," I said, this time with my voice. Thank goodness I was back.
No!
Yelled the fairy before looking at me with tear-filled eyes.
Why?
She asked. You see, you made people believe that you were fairies. That's the real power that makes you a god. Faith, I told her. She was fading fast now and slowly settled again on the ground. No one believes you're a god, I told her, before she finally collapsed on the shingly beach. I heard some disturbance in the trees. Something or someone was making its way quickly to this spot. Time for me to take my leave, I think, I told the listening world. I went to click my fingers, but just before I did, I smiled and stopped. That could be fun, I said, looking to the sky and winking at Big Daddy-O up there. I snatched the grail and click, I went to hell.
The Professor. I arrived at the site where I'd heard all hell break out. I snuck up to where I thought I'd seen the last flash of the last lightning strike. lightning strikes from a clear sky. That wasn't good. Had the fairy used the Grail? I had no idea what it would do if she used it, but she obviously did. Why had I been so damned stupid? I'd protected my home magnificently from anything breaking in, but I'd never considered that if something got in there with my invite, as it were, then it could do whatever it wished. I mean, it couldn't do complex magic or anything like that, but it wouldn't need magic to steal my shit. And when I say shit, I do of course mean precious artifacts. Excuse my use of the vernacular. I know, I hadn't invited the fairy into the manor, but I'd basically done the equivalent in Fairyland of leaving the back door unlocked. No, worse than that. Leaving the back door wide open with a sign above said door saying steal all my precious artifacts. By which, of course, I do mean shit. Because of all the protections I had in place, I'd never been concerned about leaving all these hugely magical pieces like the Holy Grail out and on display. God, I do apologize for my failure. Once again. I'd shown a level of arrogance that had caused... Well, I don't know yet what it had caused, but the fairy had certainly got one over on me. The air was disturbed next to me. Vaunt was with me. The fairy is dead there, she signed. Ah, thank you, I said, and wandered to the sad little setting by the beach. The fairy was indeed lying very dead on the pebbles. It was a scene that, in a Disney movie, would have had a very different context. I reached into a pocket and brought out the Djinn's ruby. It's complicated, but think of this jewel as a magic walkie-talkie or like a mobile phone. No, not a phone. It's definitely more like a walkie-talkie because it has no apps or anything on it. It's very pretty, though. Sorry, I digress. Anyway, I polished it on my shirt in order to give it some charge and spoke into it. Vaunt looked at me as though I was mad. She's here, Bozzy, I said. But she's dead, it seems. There was a flash, and the Djinn was now in front of me. He still burnt in raging fire colours.
Oh no, that bloody don't,
he said, bending over the tiny dead body.
That's not getting away with it, that bloody easy, love.
He waved his armless robes over the little fairy, covering her briefly, and then, when she was uncovered, we saw her take a breath. The colour came back to her flesh. As she opened her eyes, sat up and stretched as if she'd just had a good night's sleep, the Djinn pulled out a small crystal glass cubic tank. He pointed at the fairy, and then into the box, and she was suddenly transported inside it. The glass tank had no doors, no air holes or anything, and it must have some sort of magical dampening field because the fairy was firing blasts of energy at the walls with no results. Gosh, she was angry, slamming and beating her fists on the glass of her cell walls. Luckily, another magical gift that the box had was that it was soundproof to her remonstrations. Couldn't hear a bloody thing. We watched her for a little while, and we were all impressed with the rage she held. After 10 full minutes, she sat herself down in one corner of the tank and folded her arms, giving each of us the evils that could have probably killed normally. Bosworth, old chap, what do you propose to do with her? I asked. I mean, she's committed crimes in the United Kingdom. She really ought to be dealt with by His Majesty's Constabulary. Then it occurred to me that perhaps she already was being dealt with by the law, just in fairy form. I mean, ultimately, I had no clue.
You see, she's going to be a sort of trophy of sorts, Simon.
The djinn told me as his robes settled into the content neon pink that they normally wear.
Little lady will be sat proudly on bar at Phaeton Arms as a reminder to don't fuck about in Phaeton.
He told me. I smiled at this. It seemed as good a result as any for Foxglove. I mean, personally, I'd have preferred her dead, to be honest. At least that way it would be unlikely that she'd ever bother us again. I mean, even dead obviously may not last forever. After all, I'd just seen the dead brought back to life. I reached for my flask and took a drink of the wonderful whiskey blend that was in there. I offered it to the djinn, and he laughed.
I ain't got no mouth, mate.
He told me. Course not, I said. Course not.
Hey there, listeners and readers of everything dark and delicious. I'm Claver Mullum, host of the Sinister Soup podcast over at Grendel Press. Sinister Soup is a show dedicated to shining a light on oft-rejected short stories and reprints that we cannot abide being lost to time. Each month we read the best horror fiction we've gathered throughout the year in order to give credit and credence to those stories you might have never read otherwise. As an editor, I tend to seek out contemporary dark fiction with an emotional focus, psychological angle, and slow burn type of pace. If that's your speed and flavor, I think you'll really enjoy these selections. We also include an interview with each story's author at the end of every episode. So please come over and give us a listen anywhere you get your podcasts. If you really want to support your favorite indie press, go and listen at our website. Link in the show notes. Here's a clip from Sinister Soup. We'll see you on the other side. The bulbs fire up and fully illuminate the woman in the closet. Andrea screams. She falls to the floor, banging her elbow on the way down. The woman's neck stretches long, vertebrae sticking out along twisted flesh. Her head is cocked at a wrong angle, chin pointed towards Andrea like an accusatory finger. Her eyes squeeze shut and her mouth turns down in a grimace as if she ate something bitter, a wilted plant, a crushed aspirin. Bloodshot eyes spring open, full of pleading, full of a desperate desire to live. She's young. Skin pock-marked with the acne scars from teenage years of popping and picking. Unshed baby fat turns her cheeks round. Her mouth creaks open in supplication, but all that pours out is the harsh ringing of a phone. Andrea screams again. Neighbors be damned. She closes her eyes, holds her hands out in a feeble attempt to ward off the woman in her closet. Any moment now, she'll lurch forward. She'll come for Andrea. What will her outstretched palms touch first? The soaking wet fabric of her jeans? The torn blouse? Her cold, pale flesh? The phone rings again. Andrea opens her eyes, and the woman is gone. Clippy makes no acknowledgement of the disruption. The neighbors don't even bang. In a daze, Andrea climbs to her feet, nursing her sore elbow. The phone rings once more, and she hurries to answer it. Hello? Her voice is a whisper. She still tastes the mint of her toothpaste coating her teeth like a moss carpet over river rocks. Andrea clears her throat. Hello? A man on the other end is crying. A high-pitched whine slips out over the line. Andrea looks at the phone. It's Julianne, her ex. What's wrong, Julianne? Are you okay? Andrea looks at Clippy. For a second, her eyes lose focus. The bright yellow rubber turns briefly green, and Andrea thinks she's going to faint. Colors right themselves, and Clippy pops back into focus. Lemon yellow. He stares at the closet, his bright smile the antithesis of the noise Julianne makes from across the country. It's Mariana, he sobs. Their daughter, a woman Andrea doesn't know. The last time she saw her, Mariana was 13. Andrea follows Clippy's gaze to the closet. Beneath the plain blouses, the heavy jackets, the featureless cardigans, there is a dark puddle.